and welcome to the Briefing Room. I'm Bill Froehlich from WTCM Radio News, and it's our weekly conversation with some of the journalists around northern Michigan that are covering the stories making headlines this week. And to my right, Vanessa Fayz from 9 and 10 News. Welcome back, Vanessa.
Thanks.
Good to see you again. And Linda Stephan from Interlochen Public Radio. Welcome back to you as well.
Thanks.
Thanks, both of you, for coming in early this morning. And gosh, the biggest story of the week really is the story out of Benzie County, the Stapelton family. It's really the story of the past 2 weeks as we kind of continue to follow that. The attempted murder-suicide involving Kelly Stapelton and her 14-year-old daughter. I guess let me start with Vanessa. Tell me where and when you kind of picked up. I mean, obviously I know as stations we've all kind of covered it start to finish, right, but different people and different reporters on different shifts kind of get in at different times.
Right. We're dealing right now with her court date coming up and everything like that, but it's such a strange situation because her family seems to be so loved by people that knew them. I was talking to a guy last night that was telling me he grew up in Frankfort and knows the Stapletons really well. It's such an odd situation because obviously she was really struggling. I don't know if any of you read her blog. It was really strange, really strange.
And you were actually in court on Monday for what was supposed to be the first court hearing, right?
The preliminary hearing, yeah. And of course, it only took a couple of minutes, and nothing really happened. She changed lawyers, but it was really jarring to see. I know a lot of us also covered the story of her attempting to get care for her daughter back at the beginning of the year and all of the fundraising around it in Benzie County. And she just was such a dynamic mom who really pushed hard for her daughter and was just constantly seemed like she was on the go and really putting herself out there for Izzy. And I just thought she looked so altered in that courtroom. It was a full room, and I don't think she acknowledged anyone in the room but the judge. I'm sure she knew almost everyone there, but just seemed just completely altered.
Had you met her previously?
I had done a story back in February about her and her push for her daughter, and I was in her home and I just watched her. First of all, she talked about how her whole life has been centered around her daughter, and I watched her. She would be interviewing with me and then she'd take a call from the insurance company and just talk their language and do everything she could to try to get the care for her daughter that she felt was needed, and just was really on the go and always pushing. And that seemed like the biggest thing in her life was taking care of that little girl. So obviously none of us know what happened, and we're all waiting to see what the defense will say about what happened that changed so very much. Definitely,
a different person that you see just in those stories from months ago, the newspaper stories, the blog photos, the Facebook photos, compared to the so-called mugshot photo that you see now. An altered person wouldn't even recognize her almost, right?
Right.
Vanessa, tell me too what your most recent conversation has been with the school district, because I know there was a question yesterday.
As always, there was a rumor mill that her husband Matt was going to be terminated from Frankfort schools, but I did make a call yesterday and the superintendent said that's not true, not happening. So it's a very uncomfortable thing, and I feel for him because it's not an easy thing to go through, obviously, ever. And then your wife is up against this huge thing right now, and he's having to deal with that and still be in the community. And it's just a really, like she was saying, seeing her as this caring mother who would have done anything. It's like obviously this was some sort of drastic cry for help or something. It's a really sad story, I think.
And he's not only principal there, he was football coach as well. So, that opens up new questions that I have yet to ask. But what happens not only with the principalship, but football season just kicked off.
Right.
The minor details in life that seem so not unimportant right now, but there are still a whole community that's indirectly affected too.
Right.
Pat Sullivan from Northern Express was here at the table last week. We were talking about this story, and the consensus he and I both had was that almost nobody that we've talked to out in the community or who's said anything to us about this story feels like Kelly Stapleton should be punished or go to jail. And it's just so unusual. It's so different considering the circumstances. But there's
yeah.
a huge community support
There
for
really
the family.
is. That's the thing that's blowing my mind. Is just, I mean, I get, you hear stuff like this, and then people always, no matter what, usually are give her what she deserves. But this seems to be completely different, which is really strange to me. I've really never seen anything like it. I'm hearing more people say, that they feel sorry for her more than people are saying they don't.
Right.
So which is different.
And kind of the comments I was hearing, jail isn't going to help Kelly Stapleton. This is not the kind of punishment
Yeah.
/ help she needs. Have you heard any buzz either in the newsroom or out in the community covering this story?
I don't know if I have a lot to say about that. I'm not sure. I think you guys have a better sense of the tenor of the community on that. But
What did it say to you that courtroom was so full though on Monday? I got an email from a pastor who knows the family, who just showed up. I mean, like you said, it was full. There was a lot of community interest, and I'm maybe betting that it wasn't just
yeah,
gawkers
and when
who
I
wanted
say
to see
it was not gawkers, and I think definitely people who seemed to know Kelly well, and there was not a lot of chatter. It was a lot of silence, and I just felt like heartbreak. When I say the room was full, it's a very tiny room. It's a courtroom in Benzie County. It's not a big place, but it was standing room only, and people really weren't saying anything. So it's hard to say what's going on in people's mind with the whole thing, but I do think that is a community that has rallied around that family, and I would imagine them to continue to rally around that family.
Probably very true. Well, more to come on that story, obviously, in the weeks, probably months ahead. So we'll continue to talk about that one. Another story from last week that kind of got a lot of attention, an unusual situation down on the Grandview Parkway that Vanessa, you and I had covered separately, obviously, but 2 drunk driving accidents, exact same intersection, an hour apart.
Yep.
I mean, of all places and all times, it was pretty unusual. Tell us what happened.
Super unusual. So one drunk driver hits the pole right by the Chamber of Commerce, and the pole knocked down, and there's a live wire. So they called the fire department to block traffic on the parkway while Traverse City Light and Power fixed it. And
60 minutes later?
literally 60 minutes later, another drunk driver comes and runs right into the back of the fire truck and caused some damage on the back of it. There's a metal toolbox on the back of their trucks, and that thing is all dented in. The bumper is going to need some repair, and it's steel.
And it sounds like that driver didn't even slow down from what I was
Nope.
hearing. No indication that there was any
didn't see
braking.
it.
It was just
No.
full speed ahead.
And I interviewed the fire chief, Jim Tuller, and he had said they put these yellow lights on there recently because it's part of state requirement now that yellow is more visible in the dark. So it was flashing red, yellow, white. She didn't see it.
All that good stuff.
It was a very unusual, really interesting, and the police had said they hadn't really seen anything like it. It was literally 2 within an hour at the exact same spot. It was nuts.
Well, I guess A, remarkable that no one was seriously hurt.
Yes.
And B, that's the other thought that I had too, was how fortunate in a way that a fire truck was there. Who knows what else could have happened
Right.
had that driver been able to just keep going.
And the firefighter that was operating that truck was on the front bumper of it when it was hit. And the way the fire chief tells us is he felt jolted he flew off of it, but kind of on his feet.
Right.
And then walked around the back to see what happened, and there was a vehicle crashed into it. It was insane. And that's another thing to deal with, to have it where it's someone running into a fire truck was also very odd. So I was at her bond hearing, and she could face a malicious destruction of police and fire property as well. So interesting.
Yeah.
Really, really odd DUI story.
It is strange. Those don't happen a lot.
No.
Lynn, let me turn back over to you. And one of the stories on the air for IPR and on your website as well. Down in Lansing, a big rally for support of a family with, I guess, a medical marijuana history, but there's also kind of a custody battle going on. Am I following that along right?
Comes from our Capitol Bureau, but about a few dozen supporters, medical marijuana supporters, were out in front of the Capitol rallying basically for a family that lost their 6-month-old that's now in CPS, took the child into custody. And the family is claiming that it's because the father is a medical marijuana patient and outspoken advocate, and because the mother is a licensed caregiver. And advocates are saying that there have been several families that have been targeted by CPS, Child Protective Services, as a result of that. The response from, of course, the state can't comment on specific cases, but the response from the Department of Human Services is that they do take into account all prescription and non-prescription drug use in the house, how it affects children in the household. So that was their response to the rally. So
There's the indication or implication too that being a licensed caregiver, that the marijuana is being grown in the house and the child is exposed to it, essentially, right?
I'm not, again, I don't know exactly. I mean, what the Department of Human Services would say about that in terms of exposure to the child, or how that it affects children in the household. And this is again another case where the state can't tell us anything about the family and what's going on, but definitely they have a lot of support, and there's some question being raised as to whether simply being a medical marijuana patient could put you at risk for having your child removed from your home.
This is another thing that has kind of turned into a Republican-Democrat issue. We got an email in the newsroom yesterday from, I don't remember exactly, but it was something connected to the Michigan Democratic Party, and how Governor Snyder and Bill Froehlich were declaring who's fit to be parents because of this marijuana controversy. And so it's turning political, outside of the CPS arena too. So let's go back.
Interesting. I wonder if this will go through the courts and if we'll get any more information.
I think
it seems like the only way to find
happens,
out.
Yeah, and probably the only way you'll find out any specifics about the family too. It seems like it's almost like a fallback for any agency to say we can't comment on specific cases.
Right.
Wouldn't it be, sometimes in my mind I sort of imagine, wouldn't it be nice if a family could waive their right to privacy on that and say, okay, if I'm going to be an advocate for this, I'm going to allow my file to go out there. Please, tell people why specifically. Otherwise it's just a person said, agency said, and the public's left to have to choose sides without a lot of information.
I think you're absolutely right. There's a lot of that, unfortunately.
Yeah.
That it's frustrating, isn't it?
Oh, yeah.
Kind of beat your head up against the wall, not being able to get some of that information.
It's not comfortable as journalists. We want to be able to investigate it and really figure out the story.
Yeah. And that happens a lot with accidents or cases at the hospital, especially with the HIPAA laws that we've kind of encountered over the past couple of years. We could probably do a whole show on the frustrations involved with that, but I guess the example that just comes to my mind, there was a teenager injured on Mackinac Island a couple months ago in an accident with a horse, and she got trampled by the horse. And not only, we couldn't find out her condition, we couldn't find out if she was in the hospital because we couldn't get a name. Well, we couldn't get a name because she was a minor. I said, well, I don't necessarily need the name, but can you call and ask? Well, I can't ask because of it. And it was just like, all we want to know is she okay? And so there's a lot of, you've had that too. We've all had those frustrations where there's more information that we want that sometimes we just don't get. Mm-hmm. So let's talk about a story that happened in Leelanau County. Was it over the weekend, Vanessa, at the Cedar Tavern? Recently, where we've got some maybe unrelated bystanders who turned crime fighters.
Yeah, it was, it either happened Monday or Tuesday. My days all blend together. But there was a small ice cream shop that's right across from the Cedar Tavern. And the owner closed the shop around 9:30 at night, like he does every night. And he takes all of his cash receipts out. And he said when he was leaving, he noticed a man across the street that didn't really seem to fit there, and it was a little suspicious, but as he kept telling me, what could I do? He can't, what's he gonna do? So he had left, and around midnight, he got a call that his store had been broken into, The weird thing about this was the person did it about an hour later, so it happened around 10:30. And they hopped up on the counter. It's just, you stand outside and order from outside. Broke some glass and bent the screen back and reached in and grabbed the cash register and just pulled it out the window. And got in a car and had a getaway driver. And there were people at the bar across the street that watched the whole thing happen. So, and I know they were really shook up because that's kind of a scary thing. You're watching someone do this, and then if you tell, you're worried, you don't know if they're crazy, what are they going to do to you? So it was one of those really tough situations where like they did not want to be interviewed at all. They didn't want their names mentioned. They wanted to kind of stay in the shadows. Like we helped, but the Leelanau County Sheriff's Department said if it weren't for them, they probably wouldn't have found the people right away, at least right away.
Yeah.
So, but it was weird because there was only $15 taken.
Well, that's what I was going to say. I heard that too. They made off with a grand total of $15, and they have up to 10 years in prison now for that,
right?
Potentially. So.
It was a lot of cleanup for the owner, and he was such a nice man, really, really helpful, and he was in good spirits about it too. The next day, when I had called to set up the interview, he was like, "We're having a breaking and entering special today." It's funny. I'm like, well, that's nice that you can at least make light of your situation, but
nice.
I mean, it could have been a lot worse. But he didn't make out with very much, so it was just. But to do that at that time when there's a bar across the street, it's kind of like world's dumbest criminals type thing. I mean, there's literally 3 people outside, standing outside when he chose to do it.
Oh wow!
And watched him take this cash register. So interesting.
Good stuff.
Yeah.
You leave it to, I think, Leelanau County, and probably could name a couple others, but those are some of our more interesting crime cases.
Yes,
it seems
they
like.
really have some funny ones.
All right. I want to turn back over to you, Linda, because we're getting hard to believe we're talking election season already, but we've had a couple of big announcements in the past couple of weeks.
Can we just pause for a second, by the way?
Yes.
Not ready for election season yet.
All right, we could pause momentarily. I'm not ready for
a moment
it
of silence.
Yeah. Yes, it's hard. I know it's hard to fathom that conversation, but a couple of big announcements, relatively big, with the decision of Howard Walker not to seek re-election, representing Traverse City in the 37th Senate District. We've got a couple of well-known candidates now who both want that spot.
That's right, Greg McMaster in Antrim County, and representing Grand Traverse County, Wayne Schmidt, and both of them seasoned with a voting record and have some pretty big differences, and that's something that we don't often see in primary races in northern Michigan.
It was, frankly, I mean, given the term limit situation and what happened there, no surprise that Wayne Schmidt was running for that seat. I was a little surprised that Greg McMaster was already, jumping into it. He still
jumped in immediately.
Got a potential for another term in the state house. But I guess the flip side of that is once he's done, he would have to wait another 8 years before the chance to take a Senate seat. So timing, I guess, was maybe of an issue for him too, wasn't it? What do you make of the race as it stands now? What is the issue? It seems like the Medicaid expansion vote is the key difference that's kind of been outlined already by McMaster at this point.
It seems like, I mean, that's just such a clear indication party-wide of where some of the differences lie among Republicans right now, and sometimes Snyder and some of his party. And obviously that's possibly going to weigh in. The McMaster ended up, in the end, the final vote, voting against Medicaid expansion. Wayne Schmidt voted for it. It's just a kind of a key ideological difference between Tea Partiers and some of the rest of the party.
We should take a moment, and I guess we can show you some video from this week too, because there was was it a Republican luncheon in Emmet County this week, where Howard Walker was speaking to the crowd, and he took a question, several questions from the audience. One of them from I guess it's a gentleman from the Patriot Radio Network.
Tea Partier radio host.
Tea Party radio folks. They've got a station up there, and I couldn't tell you the frequency, but was asking about Howard Walker's support of Medicaid, and basically said that it was because of Democrats and a few weak Republicans that Medicaid passed. And Howard Walker did not take too kindly to that comment at all. Let's take a listen to that right now.
Question, Senator Walker. One thing that the Republican base has been against any form of Obamacare from the beginning, and to violate the hazard rule again to get this through, when the first congressional district, many places at the district level, as well as your own, or this own, Emmet County Republican Party, the executive committee, voted their disapproval for this and sent you that, along with many other Republicans. This so goes against the base and the people that you stand for, to just totally not only violate it at the base level, but then to violate the hazard rule and to have every single Democrat and to pick off a few weak Republicans to get this through, we feel totally violated.
You know, screw you as far as weak Republicans, dude.
What?
I said screw you as far as calling me a weak Republican.
I am. I stand by it based on your record.
Heck with you. I stood by my campaign commitment, and I think I did what was right. It's a lot easier saying no than it was saying yes on that. It's a very tough vote.
So there you go. We're saying screw you for calling me a weak Republican. He was none too pleased with the accusation of being called weak, was he?
No, I don't think Republicans like being called weak Republicans in general, but I think it really probably shows the stress in Lansing, and we've been watching this throughout the summer as the Senate had delayed and delayed and delayed that Medicaid vote, and in the end there were only 8 Republican senators who did vote to pass it. Howard Walker was one of them. He was targeted, I'm told, by our Capitol Bureau by Tea Partiers who were none too happy about the whole thing, and I think that is probably a good indication that he's pretty tired.
Well, and you know, we're talking right before we sat down that he's not running for re-election. He doesn't necessarily have anything to lose. You know, I talked to him yesterday, and he was pretty adamant that it wasn't necessarily a political vote. It wasn't for convenience sake because he wasn't running. But of those 8 Republicans, Wayne Schmidt is another one who voted yes.
Well, he's in the House. So
he's in the House.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, you're correct. But of those 8 Republicans, there's a lot of question of who had what to lose, and were those 8 people chosen kind of specifically to vote yes for it. So, you know, the other thing he said to me is, I did apologize after that comment, but I felt like I was being attacked, and I wanted to stand up for myself. So I think, you know, in the grand scheme of things, he recovered and handled it with a smooth response.
Hey, it happens, you know. It happens.
And to his credit too, I mean, he was being questioned and grilled by a pretty vocal Tea Party supporter as well. So that maybe had something to do with the psyche of it all. You think?
Perhaps. And you know, I think when he stepped down, some people were wondering, because everybody says they're stepping down for family, which doesn't mean that we don't believe it in this case, but you do start to wonder as a journalist, sort of the back wheels start turning about, well, what could possibly be the reason why this person isn't seeking a second term? And one of the questions that came up is all of that Tea Party pressure, is that bothering him enough that he doesn't want to run again or try to seek re-election? And from a Traverse City-centric standpoint, it's hard to imagine that he would really feel threatened for his seat. So
Right.
It's hard for me to imagine that that's really why he's stepping down. But I think that rift in the party is very clear and making itself known, and will potentially make itself known as that seat is open and as Schmidt and McMaster vie for it.
And I think at this point, it almost seems like McMaster is banking on that division over Medicaid to help him out in the Senate.
I don't know. I haven't talked to McMaster, so I haven't asked him about that, or but it is clear that we know that typically that seat in recent years has been held by a Republican. It's been held by a Republican who's in Grand Traverse County, where the vast majority of voters are casting ballots.
Right.
So McMaster, being from Antrim County, is going to be looking for the other areas to step up to the plate, and it sure seems like one of his ways of doing that, and he is rated more conservative than Wayne Schmidt by a great deal. So he is, I think, probably seeking out those Tea Party supporters and trying to rally them and get them to the polls. Would seem like a reasonable strategy.
I would think so too, and because of Wayne Schmidt's history in Grand Traverse, it seems almost like it's his race to lose. He's got maybe more of a comfortable position, but obviously there's a lot of challenges with name recognition. McMaster's obviously a well-known guy as well, so that one will be interesting to watch. Lastly, this week, let's turn back over to Vanessa, and we talked manufacturing this week. One of the obviously the big issues that goes on, and it's interesting because it's almost like we don't really talk about manufacturing unless we get word of another company coming to town, or if there's a new development, or if a senator comes to town to make an announcement, as was with Debbie Stabenow a couple weeks ago in Cadillac. But this is an actual conference kind of devoted to manufacturing in the area, right?
Yes, and today they're actually meeting with 50 TBA ISD students to kind of let them network with these companies that are here. Yesterday, the companies networked amongst themselves. It's kind of a cool thing. It's a cool way for them. They do like speed dating, but it's speed networking. So you get 4 minutes with a certain company. You kind of discuss your ideas, what works for you, what doesn't work for you, what problems are you having. Then you go to the next one. And then they have all these different events and various keynote speakers and things, and you can catch up with a person later. So today they're giving these students an opportunity, because I think one of the biggest problems they have is people not wanting to go into manufacturing. So they're trying to, there's a huge talent shortage. So I think that's part of what today's part of the conference is gearing towards, is getting the word out that there is stuff you can do in manufacturing, and this is something that could make a career. So that's what they're hoping to pull in some of these students. So it's a pretty cool thing. They do the speed networking with these companies. They do it like they would be a manufacturer yesterday at the conference. So it's a big thing. It's a huge conference.
Is there still a lot of focus on not only getting them interested, but then training them for those specific needs? I mean, we've been hearing a lot about that too, that we don't know. The needs are always changing, and so we have to constantly keep changing what we're teaching.
Right, yeah, and there's so many positions that could be filled in manufacturing. There's a ton, so I think that's kind of what they're hoping to do, and just kind of boost the industry, because there's so much to offer. There's so many available positions and jobs, and no one to fill them. So, which is unusual, because in this economy, it's like you want to take what you can get a lot of the time. So there it is. It's there. Tons of manufacturing jobs. So it's the second year only. They did it last year here too, and they've got about 150 more people this year than they did last year. So it's really growing. So it seemed to be, the speed networking was a huge hit. People loved that. It was cool.
That's a neat idea.
Yeah, it was.
Well, I want to thank both of you guys for coming in. We've got, of course, Linda Stephan from Interlochen Public Radio. Thank you for your time. And Vanessa Fayz from 9 and 10. Good to see you again as well. I'm Bill Froehlich from WTCM Radio News. Thanks for watching The Briefing Room. We hope you'll tune in again next time.